Okay, there we go. And this is Chacham Melech Ben Yaakov of Karaite Insights, and trying this format again. Really enjoying this format. Excuse me. So, yesterday I was talking about good versus evil, and I was speaking about what I think is a very basic idea of good versus evil, that the definition of good is putting aside one's lusts and desires for what is right, the right thing to do, and evil is putting aside the right thing to do for one's lusts and desires. So let's expand upon that a little bit more, and go into some other topics that have to do with that, or that that have to do with that. So I'd given the example of the definition of good, of a good person or a good act, being so simple, but it really illustrates all of good versus all of evil. So the example is, you're walking down the street, you see a wallet fall out of someone's pocket, okay? You open it up, you see $10,000 in it. Do you return the wallet, or do you not return the wallet? Of course, those who love to argue and have arguments for the sake of having arguments will sit and say, well, what if this and what if that and what if the other thing? What if the person who dropped the wallet was Hitler? And I'm not getting into that. I'm talking about a very simple situation, okay? An average situation, okay? And of course, the definition of good in this case would be, I see the $10,000. I want the $10,000, but I cannot take the $10,000 because it is morally wrong to steal. There's something outside of the immediate physical world. There's something in the ethereal, the eternal world of the spirit, shall we say, outside of space and time, outside of this physical universe. There are these certain eternal, immutable moral laws, and that dictates to me that back in this temporal, physical universe in space and time, that I shall not take another person's possessions if there is no legitimate reason to do so. Okay? So that's how the good person's mind thinks, and that is always the decision we're making when we're making good choices. Always the same decision. That's, at the end of the day, that is what Yehovah is asking us to do. Okay? Do I go with what is convenient and what is pleasurable to me, or do I go with what is right and avoid and stay away from what is wrong? And sometimes the two are overlap. Sometimes pleasure and what's good will overlap, and then there's no test, or maybe there is a test. Maybe some people don't like pleasure, or they're against pleasure. But when they overlap, let's say, I have $5 extra in my pocket, and I see a nice piece of cake, and it's lunchtime, and it's after lunch, and I haven't had dessert. I'll take the $5 and buy the piece of cake. Okay, so I've done nothing immoral there. I've done something good, I guess. Maybe bought a piece of cake from a baker, and at the same time I'll get pleasure out of that. Okay, but the real tests in this life come when the two don't overlap. What happens if you think of it as a Venn diagram? You guys remember Venn diagrams from 7th grade? I remember Mrs. Pearl. Everyone thought she was a really mean teacher, but she was the best teacher around. She was just tough. At any rate, Venn diagrams, okay, so you have you have two circles, and where they overlap is the intersection of those two sets. So one circle would be what is pleasurable, and the other circle would be what is right, and where they overlap in that little center space, like that, looks like a moon crescent, that would be what is right and what is pleasurable. And that's great. When that happens, that is a gift from Yehovah. That is the pleasure that is that was put by him in this world for us to enjoy. The question becomes, what do we do when the two don't overlap? Okay, if this is the the pleasure side or the desire side, and this is the morality side. I'm sorry, I can't make perfect circles as I drive. Driving, no hands, Mom. But where they don't overlap, the evil person will go with the pleasure circle, right? And the good person will go with the right and wrong, the morality circle. And that's it. That's our test in this world. That's it. It's as simple as that. There's nothing else that Yehovah wants to test us on. And the test, of course, can take many different forms, myriad different forms, infinite different forms, based on our situation, who we are, what kind of life we have been placed in for whatever reason, what kind of hand we've been dealt in our own lives, etc., etc. So, but the test always comes down to that same simple thing. As I always like to say, Yehovah is not complicated. He may be complex, but he's not complicated. It's very simple. Okay, I like to give the example of a Indian restaurant. I'm working on a book, and hopefully I can get back to it. And I give the example of this Indian restaurant that I used to go to. Unfortunately, well, you'll see. I used to go to, I'll put it that way, in Connecticut, and it had just the best Indian food. And I love Indian food. I used to cook Indian food. I just am very into herbs and spices and cooking, all this kind of stuff. And it had the greatest Indian food. And then I walked in one day, and I guess I hadn't noticed before, but I noticed this huge, not huge, but this statue on a table of an elephant with like 100 hands coming out of it. And I walk up to the guy, and I said, I mean, I already knew what it was, but I said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, that is the god Shiva. He brings us good luck." So I said, that's an idol. And then I proceeded to sit down and eat, and I proceeded to continue to go to the restaurant. But at a certain point, I said, I just cannot, morally speaking, come into a restaurant where there's an idol sitting there welcoming me into the restaurant. And so I stopped going to the restaurant. Well, I wish I could say that. That's a great example, and I wish I could say that I stuck to it, but I didn't, because then I started noticing every Indian restaurant basically has a statue of Shiva or some other god somewhere. So I've kind of slackened off on that, and I have gone back to that restaurant. But it's a good story, and it illustrates the point. It illustrates the point, right? Do we go for our pleasures, or do we go for what is right and wrong? Okay? And the definition of, if you look at evil, when evil perpetuates on this earth, it always starts from, I believe, the same phenomenon, which is people that cannot control their desires, they cannot control their pleasures, right? Being good requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of self-discipline. We've all been bad. Every day we do some things that are not good. Every day I do some things that are not good. We all do, because none of us are God, right? None of us are Yehovah. But I like that. And Torah Stoller Brown says, "Is this going to be considered an idol? So can a Torah scroll?" Yes, and especially when you kiss it and bow down to it, as the Rabbinites do. So I can't. By the way, I can't always read the comments when I'm talking, because I'm busy talking and I'm busy driving at the same time. So if you make a comment and I don't respond, please don't take it personally. At any rate, so the definition of, I unfortunately a couple of years ago had a run-in, or was friends with someone who, it took me a while to figure this out, but was actually a psychopath. And I don't mean that in the, the horror movie, what's the name of that movie with the famous movie with the knife in the shower scene, Psycho, I don't mean it in that way, coming after me with the knife, but if you look up the definition of psychopath, his personality fit that definition. And one of the main things I noticed about him, even before I knew what a psychopath was, and it became really, really scary and ugly after a while, but even before I knew what a psychopath was, one of the things I noticed about him is that this person was completely unable to control his impulses. If he wanted something, he had to have it immediately, and it didn't matter, he had no sense of waiting deferring pleasure, of deferring his desires, and this is the beginning of all evil. Okay, a person who cannot defer his desires. As servants of Yehovah, as followers of the Torah, we are asked sometimes to defer desires for days, months, years, even an entire lifetime, right? Avraham wanted a son, okay? He had to defer that desire, or he was forced to defer that desire for 100 years, okay? And to the point where he got so desperate at certain points that he had quote unquote false sons. He took his maidservant and had a son with her, right? And this looked like a good answer, but was not the right answer, right? So we're constantly, as good people, asked to defer our desires and to choose the right way over the way of pleasure. So how does all this relate to good and evil? If you pick apart every act of evil, at the bottom of it is a desire to fulfill a pleasure that cannot be deferred. Okay, so what are some of the desires we have? Okay, sex. Okay, I'll just talk about the physical desires, to be loved. I mean, it gets complex, but there's always the physical manifestation and the spiritual manifestation. So sex / love, right? But I'm just going to go with the most base ones. Okay, there's a natural desire for sex and intimacy. There's a natural desire for money. There's a natural desire for fame, to make a name of oneself, for oneself. There's a natural desire for control over others. This is a lust. This is a basic human lust. Okay, there's a natural desire to eat, right? And on and on and on. And the root of evil is when these desires cannot be controlled, right? So let's take the example of sex. Okay, if one wants sex, and that's a very noble pursuit. Sex and intimacy are very important things in this life. They're wonderful, beautiful things. But if one wants sex, and let's say one sees a beautiful woman walking down the street, and one cannot control his impulses and desires, he may rape her or he may seduce her, or whatever the case may be. And although I'm very against what has happened in the United States, where everything is rape and everything is seduction, I mean, it's natural and normal to woo a woman and even seduce a woman, but so I'm not talking about normal levels. But if someone, just for no reason, if the woman is dressed in a modest way and is not doing anything to provoke such a thing, and the man comes up and does such a thing, then that is evil, right? And women could do the same thing in many ways, right? Let's say a woman is jealous of her husband, right? She can't control her jealousy. She can't control her impulses. She can do all kinds of things, right? I don't like to use the example of men. Women are just as evil, if not maybe more evil than men in many ways. So I was just giving that as a basic example. At any rate, if you pick apart these desires, these lusts that human beings have, so the lust for sex, if not kept in check, can lead to all kinds of horrible things. The lust for money, if not kept in check, can lead to all kinds of horrible things, right? The lust for power, if not kept in check, can lead to all kinds of horrible things. The lust for control, if in this world, it can lead to all kinds of horrible things. The lust for fame can lead to all kinds of horrible things. And if you look at, in this day and age, our politicians in Israel and in America, if you look at if you look at the celebrities, right, what they do, what they say, there's such horrors. They'll say anything to many of them, to get fame, to get a name for themselves, to get publicity, etc., etc. If you look at people who are put in positions of power, like police, and they love to abuse their power. They become almost sadistic. They're sadists. Many of them psychologically unstable sadists. And then you see that same phenomenon over and over and over again. People going after their most base desires without respect for morality, choosing that left circle of the Venn diagram rather than the right circle when the two are not, when pleasure and morality don't overlap. And this is the root of all evil, the inability to control one's desires. And so one goes ahead and does all kinds of horrible things to get fame, to get money, to get sex, to get honor, to get control, to get power, right? We see it. This is our world around us, and it's done in so many different ways and on so many different levels and on so many subtle levels. And I'll talk about one subtle level which I wanted to bring up, and that subtle level is when I'm getting into discussions on Facebook, okay? And I notice the level of nastiness of some of these discussions, okay? I make a point, okay? If I make a point, you know, there are two ways to react. Or if anybody makes a point, there are two ways to react to that point. One way is to try to understand what the person is saying and then mutually work together towards a mutual understanding of truth, right? And then everyone has arrived at a truth. There's very little ego involved. There's very little nastiness and control involved, one over the other. So that's one way. But usually what happens on Facebook arguments, or wherever the argument may be, but I'm just taking Facebook because I get into a lot of Torah discussions on Facebook, is you say something and immediately the people, everyone there wants to pick you apart. Oh, this isn't consistent. Oh, that's inconsistent. Oh, this isn't consistent. Oh, that's, you know, as if you're a robot, okay? We're all only human beings. You know, everything we do, everything we say is in a certain sense, or can be inconsistent, right? I love the quote that a former friend of mine always used to say, quoting Walt Whitman, and Walt Whitman writes in one of his poems, I can't remember which one, I think Leaves of Grass, he says, "Do I contradict myself? Well then, I contradict myself," right? We're human beings. We're not perfect. Not everything we say is going to be 100%, you know, consistent and perfect and right, and even our facts may be wrong, our interpretations of the facts may be wrong, on and on and on. So when we say something and instantly 100 people just jump on us to pick us apart, then this is evil. This is nastiness. This is the desire to control. This is the ego acting. This is the desire to hurt another person and control another person and dominate another person and show your own dominance and just be nasty, just to be nasty. The sadism or the pleasure of putting down another person, hurting another person, is so prevalent in things like Facebook, road rage, all this kind of stuff, because there are no immediate consequences usually, right? And you don't know the other person. So this is kind of the message that I wanted to give today, and I'm getting close to my destination, so I'm going to end it in a couple of minutes. But what I want to say is, you look around the world, and I don't know if it's always been this way or if we're in a specific generation right now, but you look around the world, you look around, you look on Facebook, you look on the road, you look at the politicians, you look at the celebrities, those who are leading this world, the bankers and the Wall Street people, and you just see nastiness and evil and the desire for the lust for money and control and to hurt other people, and this is 180 degrees in opposition to what Yehovah wants, and eventually Yehovah will punish for this. There's no way he's going to sit, if he does exist, and we all have our doubts whether he exists or not. Sometimes I do sometimes, and if he does exist, which I at the end of the day have faith that he does, then he's not going to sit around forever and just allow this to happen. He's going to intervene, and he's going to say, okay, enough is enough. Okay, you cannot continue, all of my children, to treat each other like crap, like you continue to do, right? So so that is kind of my message for the day, and I wanted to kind of pick apart the anatomy of evil being related to lusts and desire for immediate pleasure. And I also wanted to, hold on, I have to be aware of my exit here, and and I also wanted to point out how much evil and nastiness there is around us everywhere we go. It just seems overwhelming at times, right? You can't make a certain Facebook post or try to make a certain point, or even try to assert yourself in public, to become a public servant, right? If look how many good people there must be in the world who don't want to be public servants because of the scrutiny that it will involve, and the nastiness that it will involve. So who ends up being the public servants? The most nasty, most evil people around. They're the ones who end up being the public servants. And if you look at, for instance, like I said, gave the example of the police, right? Who are constantly, they like to use and abuse their power, right? You ever get stopped for a ticket by the police? It's just like you feel like, you're among the, you're just being completely dominated by some nasty person. At any rate, I'm going to end it here because I'm at my destination just about, and I have to get going. So I'm going to end it here, and I hope this message was good, and I will try to continue it in another message, continuing to speak about good and evil. So take care. This has been Chacham Melech Ben Yaakov of Karaite Insights. You can visit us at www.karaiteinsights.com, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Shalom.